Please hit like, share, and subscribe. Now enjoy the Practical Guitarist podcast.
Good evening, Jim.
This is a relative.
We come
It's
to you
relative.
on two very special occasions. It is Jim's birthday, number one.
Yep.
Happy
Yep.
birthday. And
Thank
number
you.
two, it is tax day.
It is tax day.
You got screwed, my friend. It is tax day, and you got screwed because it's also your birthday.
That's it.
Hey, you guys want to go out? No, I'm busy. I got to file my taxes.
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to be eating ramen noodles for a year.
Well, it was funny. So to share with our listeners the fiasco that you just witnessed, Jim and I were talking about taxes, which we're not going to divulge any of our tax information other than to say TurboTax just let me know that my stuff was rejected from like 2 weeks ago because I logged in and looked. There was no email notification, no text message, nothing. So had I not looked, I would have gotten dinged for penalties. So I just did my whole, state PIN code thing to file, and it's all done now. So yeah, hopefully
Good news. It's been accepted.
Yeah, hopefully I'll get a text here in a minute myself. So a couple things. Jim, I'm going to Vegas next week. So the 20th, I'll be gone from the 1st through the 5th or 6th or whatever of June. Okay. And so we'll have episodes in the can. This will be, you guys will all be hearing about this posthumously, but Jim and I really didn't have the pre-show conversation. Posthumously. Anyway, so we're going to switch the episode format up a little bit. We're going to go to an hour episode, and we're going to try to do it in better blocks so that we can split content up and have and if it becomes an issue, we're not really focusing on that so much as to make sure that we can try to have shorter episodes, but with better content, right, and try to get to the heart of a matter more quickly, I guess. So anyway, Jim, what do you want to talk about this episode? I got plenty, but I'll let you start us off.
I'm going to start off by talking about. I'm going to start our little timer here. The fact that one can not like a pedal for oneself and not like the things that are going on with it, and still think it's a good idea for other people, and still think it's actually a good thing. And I want to talk to that because I put something in the group about Wampler's new what the heck is the name of it? It's not important.
I don't even remember.
That has the Tumnus and the Pinnacle, which are two great pedals, right? I mean, we could agree on that. The Pinnacle being a Marshall in the box, and the Tumnus being one of the best, right up there with the Archer and other Klons.
Yeah, I've owned the Pinnacle. I'll comment briefly. The Pinnacle is basically a JCM 800, maybe with an extra gain stage. It's not vintage Marshall because they have another pedal that does that. It's the Plexi Drive, but
that's the Plexi. So anyway, it seems to me like a great idea. The person that it was made for, I can't remember his name. The name didn't really shock me or interest me, but it said he had done some changes. I got to be honest with you. Some of the changes that he made, it's like I was looking at a joystick today, and I want to put this into perspective. Looking at a joystick today, and the person said, "Yeah, I like to put this function on this, this button."
They were preference oriented. That's somebody's signature pedal, though, right?
Right. It is a signature pedal. And the thing is, if you look at the group, you'll see who it was. And I said to myself, yeah, that's like a signature guitar. It's not for me. It's for you. He wanted the center of one of the dials to...
It's the gearbox, and that's Andy Wood's signature overdrive.
There you go. Andy Woods. Thank you. Still don't know who he is. But not important, really. It doesn't matter if I know who he is. He doesn't know who I am either. Um, so the point that I'm making though is that yeah, Andy wanted certain functions to do this and so on and so forth. Now, if you know anything about um, the way that the Tumnus works, there's two Tumnuses. I have the Tumnus Deluxe or the
Yeah, you
Tumnus
get
Max, whatever it's called.
dual pedal with extra
Yeah, the
function.
big
Yeah.
one, and it's got 6 knobs or 5 knobs instead of 3, and more switching and everything else. But what's important is that this person had this pedal designed for them.
Hmm.
They improved the pedicle for them. They improved the Tumnus
Yeah,
circuitry for them. Now that
debatably
said,
improved. They tailored it, and there really isn't an improved
right,
seal. So here's the issue and the distinction of all this:
d-
good or better, or that whole thing, like better or worse. And here's the reality:
right,
there is no better or worse. This shit's
nope,
all subjective. It's
that's right,
all subjective. That's probably the name of this
that's right.
episode. It's all subjective.
Mhm.
Because even though we use terms like this is better, I
Yep,
think what we really mean is this is better at doing this thing that I'm doing with it right now.
right.
Because like nobody's gonna buy I'm trying to think of like a metal zone and expect to get blues rock out of it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. As a matter of fact, I heard something Metal Zone related. I'll talk to that in a second. But so that's really what I was getting at is it isn't for me. The Tumnus, I so the reason I bought the Tumnus, I'll let everybody know, is I wanted a Klon clone, right? I wanted one. But I wanted a Klon clone that was close. So it was between the Tumnus, the Archer, and I can't remember. Oh, Mjolnir.
Yeah, the Molnir.
So I had those three. Those were my three tops, and I actually was going to get the Mjolnir. Right? That was my top pick at first. I watched a few videos, and then I watched. It just so happened. I don't know if it's fate or whatever. Kismet. Anderton's had a shootout of 10 different clans. You saw it,
Yeah.
and there was a real clon in there. And guess what? The only pedal that beat the clon in the clon clone
Beat.
thing was. Yeah, Beat. And then it's Pete Honore, who admitted he didn't have a lot of actual clone experience and more clone experience.
Well, I'm
That
just
said,
saying it beat, but that just depends on user preference.
that's exactly right. And what they had set up in the place at the time, the guitar he was using,
Exactly.
the rig he
Exactly.
was plugged into, so on and so forth. But anyway, and it wasn't it wasn't like, oh, the Tumnus was 10 times better than all the other. No, it was like, eh. And it was the three biggie or the three big clones were the three I picked. And then there was the actual clone. But the Tumnus was the only one that he picked above the clone that he thought might be the clone.
Well,
So
the Mjolnir, who makes that? Do you remember?
that's by what's that company that names everything weird? Um, it starts with an M. Hold on, because the spelling is so bad as far as Mjolnir goes.
Mythos.
Mythos, thank you. I knew it started with an M.
I don't know why I was thinking about JHS with that, but I knew like JHS
Yeah, it
doesn't make
wasn't.
clones
Yeah,
anymore because
nope.
they have a deal with Bill Finnegan. They made him for a while Bill couldn't, and then
Right.
yeah.
And so they don't make a clone, not anymore at least.
The Archer. Here's the funny part: the Archer is like made the KTR, or the people that make Archer, the J Rocket, made
Yep.
the first run of
Made the KTR.
KTRs,
That's right.
which according to Bill Finnegan,
And
that's a clone.
that is a clone.
Identical to the original clone, according to him.
And yep. And you can't say that the Archer isn't really damn close.
I'd say
I mean,
sonically
really.
identical, because
Yeah.
obviously they're using
Yeah, different
surface mount
different
components rather than through hole. And
right. Which is something he wanted to do for the KTR.
right.
So, my point is, I don't think that I think that what happens is in our forum even is that people took that as in I didn't think it was a good pedal, and
Mhm.
I was just it's not exciting me, but I put it in there, and the last thing I said, you know how they always say everything before the but doesn't count, so I have a but. So all that stuff that I said before it shouldn't count, right? That's what's supposed to be. And then at the end, I said,
Depends how much you piss
if you
people
don't
off.
have these pedals in your rig already, or if you don't have these pedals in your arsenal, you may want to consider this pedal.
Yeah, that might be
I
a
put
cool device.
the yeah, and I put the darn link in there. Why would I put the link in there and say you might want to add this if I didn't think it was a good idea? I didn't think that you should check it out.
The only issue I had with the way that it was presented was that my thought on this was because everybody's like, oh
And
well,
it's fine.
it had been improved because even Wampler sort of said we improved the circuit, and I don't think he was necessarily talking about the controls, and that's what the way I took that. But then, so I see this thing and you post it, and I'm like, well, yeah, it may not sound any different than your combination in your house to your specific rig, and like, but here's the key takeaway from that. I'm making a commentary about people who buy pedals based on videos.
Right.
I have done this, and I have been sorely disappointed multiple times.
Yeah.
And you just have to realize, like, your specific rig, also play style is important in that, and just understanding that those are often done in the best of circumstances. And I am absolutely certain there are times where they are fake, which I won't go into too much on the fakery side, but I know that there's been at least one pedal builder who has been accused of using an amplifier in place of his amp in the box pedal and never answered for it. So he sold 1 billion of them since. So I have to imagine they're not bad or anything, but it's just, it was like somebody accused him of that and then he never answered it, which is okay. Cause like at some point you got to ignore the trolls. Right.
Right. Right.
But it was a weird situation. And then there's been some other sketchy behavior in that past too, which I think may have brought the troll out, but also giving credence to the fact that maybe he should have answered for it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so all that aside, once you realize like the only way you're going to be able to evaluate a pedal is to actually use it and play it. That was where it basically ended for me. Because I looked at it and I said, well, the YouTube clips don't sound much different than the original clips do.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's probably because whatever improvements they made to the circuit are so minor, you'd have to A/B the pedal against each other to really see what the improvement is. But there are people that chase that 1 to 1.5% difference, thinking that 1.5% is going to make them sound that much better, and it's just not realistic.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to get to is that these are improvements, and again, Wampler himself said that there were things that he wanted to make changes with the Pinnacle over the years. So it's fine, and he's doing refinements to certain places. And you got to remember, he's thinking now the Pinnacle is sitting in a pedal next to a Tumnus. Not everybody has a Pinnacle and a Tumnus, right? So now he's thinking, okay, Pinnacle, Tumnus, Pinnacle, depending on how you wire it, because you wire it, just like the Paisley Deluxe.
Even just being able to adjust the impedance between the two pedals so that they talk properly. Yeah. And I know people are like, oh, well, manufacturers automatically set their impedance. No, that's not true. Oftentimes, they're not even paying attention to what the output impedance is, and that can have a massive effect on the input impedance. Now, I've talked so much smack about Rig Doctor on this show before, but I watched a video with him doing an interview with Paul Rivera today, and in that conversation, Mason talks about input-output impedance and line level versus, instrument level, and talking about the conversion processes and the challenges that creates. And of course, Paul Rivera, I have deep respect for. He goes on at length about, how hard it is to design a circuit with a buffer that can accommodate that, and how important it is that we do that in order to get the best possible goods out of our stuff. And now, the funny part is, I think Paul still sort of comes from the school of, let's make the impedance hi-fi style instead of let's make your guitar sound like it was supposed to into a fuzz phase kind of thing. Because that's obviously an impedance mismatch that creates some of that. And that's a weird situation to find yourself in. But I just thought it was rather interesting that that's a preference thing, right? Like going back to this idea of preferences and how your preferences, your tastes preface all this. And then modifying that that particular circuit so that it would work with another circuit, or even just upgrading the components. Maybe they're using the same IC that's in their rat clone, you know.
Right. And a thing I noticed about Andy Woods, right? That's who it was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a thing I noticed about Andy Woods and what he was using when he did the demo of it was pretty much Telecasters, one with wide range pickups and one with um, or humbuckers, and
Mm-hmm.
one with the regular thing. So I think it lends itself to the Fender community, which there's nothing wrong with that. Eventually they'll want to grow up and play Gibsons.
Oh my
But no,
God.
I do that. I got a friend of mine. I do that to him all the time. I'm like, one day you'll become a man and you'll play a Gibson. But anyway, so now it.
Is that what it takes?
Yeah, no, I'm joking, obviously, but so I noticed that it kind of lent itself in that respect. But believe it or not, I thought, okay, then definitely when Wampler does it, he's going to pull out one of his high-end. No, he played it with an Epiphone Casino. Sounded great. So again, but of course, he used his Bravado amplifier. Bravado.
Yeah, which is basically just a deluxe
is-
reverb type of thing. It's not.
And
There's nothing
really
special
awesome.
about those amps. They're just a flat,
No,
Yep. pedal amp.
flat response, which is what that's designed to do.
Well, they're not.
That's
They're
really-
not. I want to be clear. They're not flat response, but they're like a pedal
flat.
platforms. They're meant to sound
Right.
like a clean amplifier, basically.
Yeah, thing. They're meant to sound like whatever you put into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right. So that was my first thing. I just wanted to tell everybody that I still think it's a great idea. I still think it's a great idea for a pedal. It's just not something that I would be excited to put on my board.
All right, I'll take the next segment. So we've had this debate on the show before. Actually, back up. I bought a DM2 W.
Yeah.
So the Wazacraft version of the original Boss analog delay. I love that thing. Like, honestly, and I know it's, people are like, oh, it's honeymoon or whatever. I've always loved analog delays. I had a carbon copy for a while, which I liked. I liked that it had modulation on it. That was kind of a nice thing. I don't think I ever turned the modulation off, quite frankly. But I always thought they were dark. Then they came out with the carbon copy bright, but I thought the carbon copy bright was too bright. So, I needed the Goldilocks. I needed to find that one that was just right. And I think the DM2, even though it doesn't have modulation on it, because it's a big fat sounding delay, I think it's kind of an acceptable substitute for my obsession with tape delay. Because I never liked the tape delay sounds where the tapes were like worn out. I always liked the fresh tape sound in front of an amplifier, that kind of thing was an option. So it's going on my board. I ordered a bunch of stuff to mount it to my board. I got the 128B plate that goes on the bottom of the Boss pedals. It's flat and all that. And I'm getting my board straightened out. I'm getting all the pieces I need to put it together. I'm cementing my board, and I'm planning not to add anything to it for the remainder of the year. Now, I am not saying I'm not going to buy anything, and there's not going to be anything new on my board in the next 6 months. But I'm trying to make it difficult on myself because I have intentions long-term of upgrading to a slightly bigger board with a switching system on it. I'm probably just going to do the ES5, go cheap. Just because I want to be able to control my amplifier channels. I've had some issues just playing around the house and hitting the fuzz on the wrong channel. And it sounds awful. And I don't want to get into a situation where I'm doing that all the time live. And it has to do somewhat with my pedal board layout and some other pieces of that. But that's kind of the thought process that's driving this decision. So with that, and this is probably the more interesting part of this, I have some pedal board supplies, which you probably know about this stuff if you've never built a pedal board before. I think this is good content. So I have these guys, which are cable mounting tie downs, and that should be able to autofocus, but if it doesn't,
I have a whole bunch of those.
Basically, they're adhesive on the back. These are not the super nice marine ones, but I don't plan on doing a lot of marine touring, and I'm not world touring, so I think it should be fine. And basically stick them to your board in a line or however you want to do it, and you zip tie your cables down. Now, I used to be the guy that was like, well, I don't want to zip tie them down. What if something goes bad? Then I'm going to have to pull everything off. Listen, when you can get on Amazon and you can buy, it's here somewhere.
I did that too. Bought a big bag of little zip ties.
Yeah, the 2-inch zip ties or whatever, 4-inch zip ties.
Yep.
I bought a bag for like $7.99. I got 1,000 of them. I was literally putting on and then cutting them off the other day while I was working on it, because I'm like, we just want to get it tied down so that everything runs in the correct way. And I realized, like, I'm running my board with the patch cables from the board prior, so I don't really actually have the right lengths. And so I said, I'm going to have to make new cables. Now, granted, we talked about, so I have actually sitting on my desk because I've been going through bins.
Soldered and solderless.
Solderless cables, right? These are Georgels. And this is a popular option for people who have not built a ton of boards and are not really comfortable with a soldering iron. There are reasons why you might not want to use this, and I'll go over that in a minute. But basically, I am going soldered again. I'm using Mogami 2319, and I'm going to square plugs, so I actually ponied up and got nice plugs, because I'm planning on keeping this board for quite some time. And so the reason why, what I really wanted to talk about with regards to this is, so Georgel's cable, right? I don't have the capacitance sitting in front of me at the moment. I could look it up. This cable is really, really bright. And I've had conversations with show listeners and other people, and I'm not going to dispute what they say, but I will point out, this is bright cable. You can cut the ends off this. You can actually use this cable with an existing plug, solder it on, and you're going to have a damn bright cable. It's going to be very high fidelity. It's going to be kind of clunky because this stuff's like, it's I don't know if you can see that. It's really thin, but it's like, it holds its shape real well. It's actually kind of hard to run on a board. Like, a lot of people bend it while they're putting it together, and it's not solid core, which I actually sacrificed some to find out, because I was having a conversation about that with somebody. But people talk about cable, and this is going back to Rig Doctor. He talks about, and also Paul Rivera in the video talked about, you want to use soldered cables if you're going to be touring in any sort of environment where you're going to have air, liquid corrosion kind of stuff, anything that's going to be exposed to the air, basically. But here's the deal. So I tend to agree with them. If you want a solid connection, like where you can't break it and it can stand up a lot more abuse with good tension on the on the plug itself and stuff, so that the wire is not moving around and pulling on the leads as they're attached to the grounds and the connection. Yeah, solder. That's the way to go. But they say, well, it's not gas tight. When I hear that, I cringe, and I'll explain why. I'm in the telecom field. I'm IT guy, right? So I've been doing wiring installations for companies for a long time for digital signal cables. It's much smaller wire, stranded, usually, sometimes solid core. And do you know that all of your telephone equipment is usually terminated without solder? I mean, it's punch down block. It's two pieces of metal that go like this and accept the wire and then close on it.
Okay, I can tell you this from coming from National Telecom.
Yeah.
That is a fact from your home, from the back of your phone, and remember the old wired phones?
Yeah.
To all the way through your house to what we call the NID, or the network interface device, which is where you were responsible and we were responsible, all the way back to the next tie point, to the next tie point, to the switch. The only place that's soldered is in the actual, anyone who knows what the switching equipment looks like, the OE, or operating equipment, that controlled your line, your specific line. So you had your own card, okay? That's the only solder point you had. For some people, 12, 15 miles. So to say that you can't control um, your guitar signal from, I don't know, 14 feet away. I'm pretty sure you're okay.
I
You don't have squirrels chewing on it or freaking.
Well, so that's what I was going to say. So like, yeah, are they right? Yes, they're absolutely right. Like the biggest problem in telecom is corrosion, right?
Yep.
And specifically salt corrosion. You get in the
Yep.
spring, those guys are so damn busy fixing like downed wire, basically oftentimes under the ground or up on a pole somewhere, maybe up on a tower, that it's like, yeah, I see. I totally understand and respect their opinion on this, but I also think that those are totally and vastly different circumstances where that stuff holds up really freaking well. And I want to point out something else. Stranded cable, we just mentioned that, right? That's not a gas tight connection. You can get corrosion anywhere, including on your solder joint. So why in the hell would it make a difference if it's on this end of the electrical system, this end of the electrical system, this part of the electrical system, or this end of the electrical system? Corrosion is corrosion. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
It doesn't matter.
That's absolutely right.
And so, I mean, I get it. You want it because some jackass could pull on your soldered cables real hard and pull the tips off if they're pulling them with a truck. That could be a problem, but you're not going to, like, a mechanical connection like solder is going to be tougher than that. And that's basically what it's about, right? It's about stability here, not necessarily the corrosion as much, which is what I've been trying to articulate this for weeks because I've been thinking about it and I'm like, I'm totally fine and comfortable saying I'm happier with soldered cable only because I have more control over my sound, but also because I know they're a little bit more bulletproof, just a little bit. Because I've had, so like not cables like this because I don't use these anymore, but I've had patch cables go bad live, or you get to a gig and you think they're bad because you made them yourself and you're like, oh shit, and you start pulling things and running all these different cables trying to figure out what's going on. And of course I explained on that one episode, like that ended up happening. So, excuse me. That ended up happening to me, and what it ultimately resulted in was me realizing I had the volume knob turned down on my King of Tone. So it wasn't passing signal. It wasn't the cable at all. So I also bought a cable tester to do all this stuff. And all told, so to get into making your own cables, you're going to spend some money. You're going to buy soldering iron, $30, $40, to all the way up to whatever you want to spend. And then your cable supply. So to do my board, I bought this stuff to make 14 cables. Some right angle, some straights, just whatever works best for the given situation. Which is probably more than I need, but I wanted to have a little bit extra scrap also just to have them around in case I need them. And power. So I'm doing power too this time. This is the first time I've made DC cables, but I'm tired of dealing with. So if you've bought a power supply, Jim, I know you got a power supply. You get those one size fits all cable, and you end up with like 5 extra inches for like half your pedals, or you end up with the
or you want
one that's straight across your entire board. And it's like, seriously, this cable costs less than a nickel a foot. And you're telling me that you can't give me an extra 4 inches? I would rather them give me long ones than give me short ones. And anyway, they never give you, so like Voodoo Lab, they give you all their, they give you like 4 corner jack ones, and then they give you like 4 straight ones, and then the corner jack ones are a different length than the straight ones. And then like they also give you all these like mishmash of other cables, and then you can buy additional cables direct from Voodoo Lab. And I'm thinking, I'm looking at the prices, number one, and I'm going, holy crap, these are not that expensive. And on top of that, they're not going to be the right damn length. I'm going to end up with a 24-inch 9-volt cable for a pedal that's only 8 inches away, like kind of deal. And or vice versa. I'm going to have to get the 9-inch cable for the pedal that's like 18 inches away. And it just doesn't, like, it ends up just making everything a mess. So I have like 4 pedal boards worth, power supplies worth of cables laying around, and I still was struggling to find the right connectors and connections. So I said, screw it. I'm wiring my own power. Because I said, at this point, I can buy soldered DC jacks, and I can have them perfectly aligned. So that's what I'm going to do. There's some other tips that I can give people. Number one is like, talk about power supplies. Not all power supplies are created equal. You definitely want to get something that's isolated. I would look for a switching supply. That seems to be the standard these days. Even Voodoo Labs' new power supplies are switching. Or they use some different fancy form of a transformer, because transformers put off electromagnetic interference, and in certain cases, it's going to cause problems. I have never, and Jim, I've owned probably 100 pedals at this point. I've never had a pedal that was prone to magnetic interference, but apparently it's a thing. And some people bitch and complain and say you shouldn't buy a Voodoo Lab Pedal Power Plus 2 because it has a transformer in it. Listen, lots of people use those for a really long time without ever caring whether it had a transformer in it. Now, some people got pissed because they take them overseas, and then somebody put 240 volts through them and fry them, and that's why they went to the switching supplies. That's really the reason. Okay? If there was no different power overseas, they would be running all of this stuff on the same transformers they already were. It's the same thing as the AMP1. He designed that with a switching power supply because he knew it was going to be subjected to all kinds of different voltages. You bought one of those. Did they give you the other adapters for foreign countries? Yeah, I figured they would, because that was like part of the selling point. Yeah. So you use a regular IEC mains in, and then the other end there's an adapter that goes into the wall that adapts you to whatever power you're plugging into.
Yep.
Now, so power supply, all that stuff. Another thing that's been said to me is don't put your power supply underneath your board, because apparently it orients your transformer underneath the pedal. Like you might put pedals directly on top of it. God forbid, because what does everybody do, right? They get their, Rig Doctor talks about this. Mason from Vertex talks about this. He says, be careful, because if you put your power supply on your board, you're going to be mounting pedals right on top of it. So inevitably, what does he do in every single video? He puts the power supply underneath a riser, and then he puts pedals on top of it. And I'm going, is that riser an adequate shield? You know what I mean? Like, it's not a Faraday cage, buddy. It's the same shit. Or my personal favorite is the, you don't have to separate your power and your audio cable. No, you really don't. In practice, you really don't. But should you? I mean, science says yes, because especially if you have transformers, you're going to have electromagnetic fields carried by any of the DC coupling cables that are used. So theoretically, if you already have a problem with a transformer on your board, you probably shouldn't be running those cables right on top of one another. Just saying. And it doesn't take much to actually isolate them. On a cable that size, passing that kind of voltage, it could be a centimeter apart. And actually what I do, just because I'm anal, actually the real reason I do it, I'll explain the real reason I do it, because it has nothing to do with voltage. But so one of these guys, I put power on one side, audio on the other, and we tie them down to one rail apiece.
Yeah.
What's the problem? And then cross everything at 90 degrees, just like you do in a music studio. When you build something in a music studio and you want low noise, that's what you do. You cross all your power at 90 degrees to your audio. And preferably, if you can get away with it, you find a way to route your power cables so they're always 1 foot away from your audio cables. That's why people don't realize those racks are so deep. Why are the units that go in them only this big? Because they're routing the power a foot away from it and then dropping it down and dropping the signal cables right off the back of the unit so they never touch. That's why. Just little things that I know that I've seen in my travels that just like irritate me, because people are like, no, there's no science behind that. Nobody does that for, Listen, people have been doing it for 50 years in music studios. I think somebody figured something out at some point along the path. I don't think people do. go to great lengths to do things like that unless there's something behind it. Can you make records if you run your cables together? Sure. Will your rig sound good if you run your cables together? Maybe. Probably. I gotta say probably because I do it all the time. But I'm going to do it right. And if I'm going to take the effort to do it right, I'm going to do it right. I'm literally going to go as far as I can, balls to the wall, like sonically the best way it should be. And if somebody told me, well, the white noise is generated by your power supply, and the cables in proximity to your audio cables will make everything sound bigger and more 3D, and it was true, I'd be like, hell yeah, let's do it. Doesn't matter to me. But and I'm not speaking from experience on this stuff. I'm just speaking from what I've read. I know that we have a local pedal board builder here, who's really damn good, and he would probably laugh at some of the things that I'm saying because he's like it's just in practice it doesn't mean anything. But it's like, if I'm gonna do it, why wouldn't I go all the way? I wouldn't just try to do it to make it faster.
Yeah.
So, if anything's worth doing, it's worth doing it right. It's kind of my mentality, and I know I'm sure there's some people like just get it done quick and dirty, and that's fine. And if you've got those kind of gigs where like, shit, you're gigging 3 nights a week, and you got to put your pedal board together the day of the gig, yeah, of course, absolutely, burn the candle at both ends and get it done. But in my situation, it's kind of like, I got the luxury to do this, so I'm gonna. There's a lot of myths, Jim. I mean, I guess that's what I'm putting out there. I'm sure a lot of this stuff you never even thought about. Because you got a couple boards now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you got to remember when it comes to bleeding frequencies is it's got to be pretty high frequency.
Sure.
So about as much about a twisted pair as I do. The cable that they use to send your guitar down, not likely to go over. Now that said, that possibility the power could if it's got AC riding on the DC power.
Right.
You can,
or a bad ground in a pedal or something like.
Yep.
You'll have to have something wrong in the system for there to be a real issue.
Right. So, but would I sit there and wrap them together? No. I would run them apart anyway. But
the real reason to run them apart, and this is what I neglected to mention, the real reason to run them apart is so that when I have to troubleshoot on my board, if I look at my board and I go, this pedal's not lighting up, right. Then I go, cut the power lines and replace the power cable instead of, oh shit, I have to cut all the cables off my board and find the one that's bad. You know what I mean? Like, it would be better to have them separate just for that reason alone.
I go the extra length of actually color coding the two ends of power.
I do that too. I don't label them.
Yeah, I don't need to do that to the audio cable because it's obvious that typically it's going to be the pedal next to it, or I'm going to know if it was weirdly done. So that's not a problem. The thing that I like to do personally is I like to run I'll use it's just this little piece of electrical tape, literally, and I have 7 or 8 different colors, and I color code them. And then just like in a resistor, if I have to have 2 reds, I just put a black ring with a marker around the 2 ends of one of them, and then, because that's how resistors,
Yeah, right.
You use the color coding on a resistor to see.
That system is such a nightmare.
Yeah, and it is. But this way I know, okay, that one's feeding this one and that, so on and so forth. So, but I think we have a similar way of looking at that. Go ahead.
There was another piece of this. So along with the power and flexibility and understanding that like something breaks, the good reason to keep your solderless cables once you've graduated out of these guys is if something breaks. Because if you have 10 foot of this in your bag and 2 ends, you can cut a cable and you can just zip tie it right on the top of the board or something, and get through the gig. And they're flexible and they're small, so at least it's not a horrendous fix. But in a pinch, okay. I have hundreds of dollars worth of George L's leads, like the ends and stuff. In fact, I totaled them all up. I was going to sell them at one point. I haven't sold them yet. I am going to sell them. And I will put them up in the group when I do. I would still be using George L's for certain applications. Like if I was a country player, because I'd won all that treble. Yeah, George L's, man. I even just the cable is like gold for that. I have never used a cable that is as bright as George L's, and it was borne out in the capacitance numbers when I evaluated what cable I was going to move to. So I was looking at Mogami, and I was looking at Belden, Canary, and Gotham, and they all make different products. But I was looking at a couple of different varieties, and I went with Mogami because it has a warmer sound because the capacitance bears it out, and actually it does. It's a much fatter sounding cable because there's no treble to it. It rolls off a lot of it. It's not as bad as a coily cable, not in any way, but you'll definitely, if you run 10 feet of it on your board, you're going to notice. It's definitely a warmer sound than what I was getting with the George L's with 10 feet of George L's on my board. And in fact, I did A/B test, and I never posted the results because I didn't think that there was enough there to even care about. For most people, it wouldn't have been, because I only did like 2 feet. There really wasn't that much difference in the 2 feet. I know, and I've talked about maybe doing it where I'll take 10 feet and show the difference, because 10 feet is probably on average what most people are running on their board. And you can definitely hear it. I mean, I could hear it out of the two, but I don't think most people would be like, he's holding the pick differently or something. And it was like, not really, because I played it through a looper. It's like, and I used the same cable to run it into the looper. So, I don't know. It's a whole thing. And you could actually, there are other people that have done testing like that. Paul Rivera talked about it in the video. He's like, yeah, we did testing. And he talked about a couple of different cable solutions they were using. They were using a ham radio cable at one point. And I think one of the other ones was like some sort of telephone cable. Which is not RJ, 45 style cable, but it was like some other specific telephone cable. And, it really just comes down to this. What works for you? Making sure that it's solid and rock solid, right? Routing your cables in a way that makes sense to you, and just getting it done. I mean, so like, I've done it enough times now. This board's going to look really good when it's done. In fact, I think I sent you pictures of my previous board. Maybe I'll pop them up in the podcast here. The board that, as it currently stands right now, I had that routed exceptionally well for having excess cable and stuff. So, I mean, I would not even bat an eye about taking that to a gig the way it is right now. So, anyway, that's that segment. I've had enough talking about things that are probably going to get me in trouble with various people, because I speak with many show listeners. I have friends who are devotees of solderless, and I have friends that are devotees of soldered cable. And I have heard many weird things from both sides, which is really funny because I'm kind of in the middle, and I'm like, I'm the only one sitting here going, it's just capacitance, guys. It's just capacitance. The sound of a solderless cable is capacitance versus a soldered cable. It's just capacitance. There's literally no other difference except for reliability if you're putting your board through hell. And to put it in perspective, for the people that say that solderless is horrible and it's, the devil and should be wiped from the face of the earth and, expunged. Here. One of my local shops, they build boards for people. There are over 100 boards in service that they have done that remain in service, most of them, unless the user decides to change pedals out or goes to somebody else and gets it done, that were done with George L's. And to my knowledge and to their knowledge, there haven't been any failures. So it is what it is. I mean, sure, is it less reliable? Absolutely. That's like a fact. But the reality is, how less reliable is it? That's a good question.
Exactly.
It's a good question. Common sense tells us we shouldn't do it, but common sense tells us we should not build our power grid and electric grid, or not our power grid, our electric telephone communication grid on punch down blocks, but we do it anyway. When you're like, have you ever been in an area where your utilities suck, Jim, and like there's constantly problems with the phones and stuff? And then, like, you call them out. I had this happen. I had a client that was in an area that was notoriously bad, a town called Franklin Park. And all of the telecom lines and stuff were laid in, like, the 40s and 50s. And most of it had not been updated at all. So they had, and this was not that long ago, so this is kind of embarrassing. They had a T1 with, like, 1 meg down or some stupid bad number like that. And they were running an entire organization on this.
The 1 meg T1?
Yeah, with like 30 people in the office or some shit with like a 1 meg T1. And it was divided. Some of it was voice. So it was divided. It wasn't even a full T1. And so this whole thing was like, it was just a nightmare, right? And they had internet problems constantly. Internet would go completely down. I'd go upstairs, I'd kick the Adtran, which was their T1 modem. I would pull the plug and restart it, which I'm not supposed to do. And then we actually found out where their DMARC card was, which was in their building. It was in their factory downstairs, underneath the stairs by a slop sink.
Quite normal for some reason.
Oh yeah, because they just put it wherever the fuck they want it. Like, you know that. I mean, it's just like, here, we'll just put it next to this water heater.
Yep.
That sounds like a good idea. Like, who authorized you to put it there? So I actually convinced them to move it. This is a client of mine. I convinced them to move it. They put it upstairs. Next tech comes out. He sees it upstairs. He's moving it downstairs back to where it was. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? He brought in a new cage to hold the cards. And I'm like, I just sat there and I shook my head. I was like, this is about par for the course, right? But they told me one time, they came out, they had the panel off the wall, and I could see all the punch down block inside, and they had all the tags for all the different neighbors and stuff, and whatever lines they were connected outside. And he was just pulling the lines out, and I'm going, people are connected to those. He's like, who gives a shit? I'm like, okay. And he was basically saying, like,
the people on the other
lines
end?
the lines in this neighborhood are so bad. He's like, we just redo them when we open these boxes up. And he was like, he was telling me, like, he showed us our line. There was like, you could see visible rust on it. And he's like, yeah, we're going to replace this. You're going to get the guy next doors. And then when he complains, their people are going to come out, and then they're going to swap it for the guy next door. And it's just going to be this big, like, everybody's going to be swapping it until they finally come out and lay new cable. And I just sat there and I just put my head in my hands. And I was like, I was really young at the time. I was probably like 25 years old.
We call it swapping pairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly what they're doing.
Normal.
And they'd come out and they'd do it every 3 months. Something would happen, and every 3 months they'd come out and swap pairs. And I know sometimes we were getting swapped, which is why all you've got to do is contact the SEC and say, this has got to end. We need, because believe it or not, they want to do the right thing. The problem is budget. But when the SEC says to do it, now they can go to the state and they can say, hey, we need to do this, because they might need right of way, because they might need to pull cable through some new conduit or whatever. And in our state,
there's a whole lot.
In our state, there's a lot of issues with that, because our state's very corrupt. And so you could call the SEC and they would just be like, nah, you're in Franklin Park, you're screwed. Yeah. Like, we're not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
So one of the things, like, a lot of people will not know, I'm going to tell you a couple of little secrets from the inside. So one is, the reason that AT&T was first to market with 4G was because they paid everybody else to keep their fiber dark.
Yeah.
And the funnier part of it is, the fiber they rode to their towers belonged to the other companies.
Yeah.
Like in your area, there's Metro something.
Metrocom. Yeah.
Yep, Metrocom, and we had some. Verizon had some, and then of course AT&T had some. Believe it or not, Metrocom and us provided as much fiber as they did. um, the other side of it is that when it comes to that, so let's say you'll go to your neighbor. Like I don't know what your situation is, but let's say you have a block of houses,
Yeah.
and you might have street A that's parallel to street B.
Mm-hmm.
That the houses literally meet with a rear fence.
Yeah.
Street A has fiber and coax cable,
I've run into this.
and the other one doesn't. And you're
Uh-huh.
like, can't I get fiber? Because now I'm literally stuck in a monopoly. No, you can't. Because what happens is, again, like you said, the cable company pays off the local politicians to say, hey, don't let those fiber guys through here, and we'll word it in such a way that it looks like it's because we're saving some freaking rare squirrel or some dumb shit like that. When in reality, their freaking lines are running right through there. There's a piece of conduit already there. The fiber, which releases absolutely no EMI because it's fiber, which is glass and light. That doesn't do anything.
Novel concept.
How about that? So yeah, when I had to go through that stuff because I lived in what they call facilities, and I also did what they call inside network. And I'll tell you, some of the stuff I went through to just get 10 feet of effing cable between two, because oftentimes, like the Twin Towers were a prime example. They were towns, cities among themselves in a weird way. You can't really call them a city because
Yeah, but they had like the way they were set up is like they have this giant room in the basement where all the cable terminates, and like
actually was all the way up.
yeah, and sometimes it's at the top too. Like yeah,
They had their own switches, and and so not all the way up, but quite a ways. But so they had their own switching, they had their own networks, they had their own stuff that we fed from the main switching. But that's normal in a large place.
yeah, we've had that in our building too.
Yeah, the size of literally a town or a city, because they've got several thousand phone lines and faxes, and of course T1s, T3s, OC 48s, OC 120. I mean, we could go on and on. So that's a it's a thing that a lot of people don't appreciate. But you get down to what does that got to do with Guitar Gear, and it's this: a lot of people who engineer at this level are forgetting that guitar is pretty darn simple. There's some wires. You live within what,
a much smaller band of what you deal with when you deal with this other stuff.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, there's just not that much. We've only got the audible frequencies that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And
telecom, it's all over
short.
the place. I mean, they use every available amount of bandwidth they can squeeze through a Cat 6. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I was going to share as it applies to guitars. So this is a standard that actually happens in the telecom community. You're not supposed to run Cat 5 or Cat 6 within a foot of fluorescent lighting.
Yep.
Now, unless you're in a really fancy office building where they actually hang a plenum that the cable sits in, and that plenum has been designed to be a foot away from the fluorescent lights, I am willing to guarantee you your building is not spec.
Nope.
And do you have network problems? Ask yourself that. Do you have network problems that are like, indicative of just network, like general network mischief, because it's be like drop packets and things like that? Probably not.
Exactly.
In fact, I had many, many clients where I would come out and they'd work on their network, and I never took a look at their wiring until something blew up, and then it was like, yeah, we probably should rewire this for you because you guys, whoever did your wiring just ran them right over the fluorescent lights up there, which is a fire hazard too. But it's like people seem to think that guitar equipment and gear and signal routing and all that stuff is like, because it's their hobby, they get really, really freaky about it. You know, it's like, my God, I have to use this, you know, this $500 Mogami cable with gold plugs. It's like, guys, wait a minute. Do you think anybody in the 60s was using a $500 Mogami cable with gold plugs? And that's the sound you're after. Like, what the hell are you on? And also, like I just said, it doesn't really matter what the spec says because there's just differences. I can tell you this cable, even though I said it was really bright and it's all capacitance, it does have a frequency curve to it. And like the mid-range will be different from cable to cable, regardless of the top end. And you can hear that. So I want to kind of back things up a little bit. I can talk till I'm blue in the face about, like, you know, is this a soldered versus solderless conversation? No, it's not really. It's more about just finding what works for you and doing it in a way that makes sense, rather than, I've seen so many flat boards with people using Hosa cables, and like Hosa cables. Okay, so depends on the Hosa cable, because the cheap Hosa cables are awful. Some of the more expensive ones are okay, but you're going to end up with all this extra shit to deal with that you don't want to deal with. So spend the extra $5.
Yeah.
Jim, as we close this out, I want to leave with this in mind. Ernie Ball, there's another company that's making flat patch cables. Those are great. But Ernie Ball makes them as well. You can get pancake jack cables from pretty much every company under the sun nowadays. And even just simple right angle jacks are fine. That's an Ernie Ball.
Yep, that's an Ernie Ball. You can get a 3-pack of these, super cheap, cheaper than
they're like $12.
the wireless flat.
It's definitely cheaper than what I'm going to make.
Yeah,
100%.
So,
so you know, just buy some decent damn cables.
Yep.
I will say this: I've had my negative experiences with solderless cable vis-a-vis friends and stuff who've had like lava cable, and it's cheaper than George L's. Well, George L's was the first on the scene, right? George L's is premium stuff. They got people like Eric Johnson backing them up, and they went out and they, you know, oh yeah, so now there's lava cable, which is like $2 cheaper total per cable. You know, it's like, guys, it's $2. It's $2.
So I had a little. I'd like to dovetail on your cable thing. I was at the store. I was at Guitar Center waiting for my lesson, and this guy comes in. He goes, "Oh, that's really funny. 18.6 feet." And he goes, "Geez, they can't give me one more foot," or you know. And I'm like, "There's a reason it's 18.6 feet."
Because it's 3 inches extra on either end.
What? He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because that's where you start to get high-end loss. So if you have 18 point, or if you have 17 feet, you're going to notice the loss for sure. So 18.6 is where they can safely go, okay, we're not going to have signal loss.
I never thought about that on those particular pieces, but you're absolutely right. I've actually seen situations where they will, so like, this is not a good example because the right angle like literally terminates right there, but they'll say, let's say this is an 8-inch cable, and they will measure the 1/4-inch jack.
Yes.
And say, that's, you know, part of the measurement. It's like, it's not really 18.6. It's only 18. The other 3 inches are inside the 1/4-inch plug.
And that's right. And that's it. Yeah. And so the guy goes, and I said, that includes the tips. And the guy goes, "Is that real?" And everybody was like, yeah, it's real. As a matter of fact, I know that Brian Wampler did a whole show on talking about how you have signal loss. He goes, I don't recommend cables much longer than 18 feet as a result. So he likes to keep his under 16 feet.
It has to do with the capacitance again. So
Yep.
at a certain length of, you have more roll off in a specific range based on the certain length of footage, and there's a number you can use. But the vast majority of guitar cable will go 18 feet, and then you'll start
Yep.
to have signal loss after 18 feet. So everybody who goes to the store and buys 20-foot cables, because everybody does it, right? I have probably 5 20-foot cables, and the reality is I've already shot myself in the foot, right? If I'm looking for every bit of information coming out of my guitar, really anything over 10 foot, I've shot myself in the foot, because at that point there's so much capacitance that you're losing something. You may not be able to audibly hear it, but you're losing stuff.
Right.
And it's
Now, those
just a
country
fact.
guys, yeah, and a lot of those country guys, that's the first place they're going to notice it,
Mhm.
is that high end, because that's what they get.
Well, if they can still hear it.
There is definitely a questionable thing. I mean, let's face it. There's always that questionable point that is it really worth the argument when it comes to live performance versus what I hear on stage and blah 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 blah. And I look at it this way because we're coming up on our hour.
Yeah, well,
I look at
let's do one more 15-minute segment, and I already know what we're going to talk about. But go ahead.
Okay. And I'm going to say this. Even if you can hear it, and it should, there's two things to think about. There's one, the sound you hear on stage should inspire you to play. I know this. If I can't hear my guitar, I can't play. Okay? And maybe that's just me. I know some people, they play mechanically. I can't do it. I have to play audibly. And
Yes.
I was telling my guitar instructor last week. We were sitting in the room, and he goes, "Jim, I play something, you play it. I play it, you play it." And I said, "Yeah, but that's because I can hear you play it, and then I respond to it, and I could." He goes, "Because you sometimes play something different." And something. I go, "Well, sometimes I'm doing call and response. Sometimes I'm just trying to figure out what you did, and can I do it differently? Because my fingers are smaller, or I'm not as comfortable because you're playing a different guitar than I am." And so that's and I've been trying to keep playing the same guitar each time. So I bring Pearl each time to keep that steady. And I think it helps each time you go and you learn the feel, that feel. So that's part of it. The other part of it is there's the other person that'll say, well, the audience doesn't hear the difference. So here's what I say: whatever you want. That's what it should be. Whatever you want. If you want that high end, if you hear it, if you miss it and it helps you, then do it. If it doesn't, if you want to, the audience thing, then do that. But don't put somebody down because it's not what you think is the right way to go. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
you. I don't think you would do that. I'm talking about anyone that would do that. I don't think that it's fair.
We've
to
said
do.
this on the show before. It comes from another podcast, 60 Cycle Hum. There are things that are appropriate or inappropriate for a given situation, and that's what that falls into. It's a subjective thing.
That's right.
As much as people will try to make it not subjective, it's subjective. Unfortunately, it is subjective, and I will stand by that. I may not stand by comments I made about solderless cable before in the past, but I will stand by the fact that all things in guitar are subjective. To the degree in which they are subjective, that's questionable, but they are all subjective, because you will find people out there that will prefer something even though it's not technically the correct thing to do. So it is what it is. Final segment, actually, what I wanted to talk about for about 15 minutes, and I'll probably cut down some of the previous segment. Final segment, hearing loss. And I actually want to talk about hearing loss because we talked about signal loss. So it makes sense to talk about hearing loss because it's a related concept, right? Everybody should be wearing plugs on stage. I have been guilty many times of forgetting my plugs and not wearing them on stage. Fortunately, the last time I did it, my ears weren't ringing. So thank God I didn't do any more damage than I've already done. But I think people tend to assume that, you know, their hearing is okay unless they're told otherwise. I can tell you the vast majority of people I play with, albeit drummers, guitarists, bass players, have hearing loss. They do. They may not know they have hearing loss. I have heard people cranking up treble that just doesn't need to be there. And I don't think, and it, like, to the point where it's unpleasant, it's physically unpleasant to be in front of your, you know, amplifier. I think some of that's also because, you know, people point amps at their ankles. But like drummers, because they're a foot away from their cymbals most of the time, and cymbals are the one thing in a band that just totally wrecks your ability to hear high frequencies. I can say that I don't want to stand next to drummers anymore when I'm on stage. There's something I've noticed. I already have some high frequency hearing loss. You can find a lot of engineers who have high frequency hearing loss. Apparently Mutt Lange can't hear like anything above like 15 kilohertz or some crazy.
Which is weird because of the perfectionist that he is.
Well, apparently he has high frequency hearing loss starting at like 2K.
Yeah.
Which should tell you something. He's mixing a lot based on the mid-range. And for some reason, he's found that magic stuff that also filters into the high end and the harmonics and all that stuff. And probably also relies a lot on gear that he knows to get away with it. And apparently this is like a real... Mix Magazine did an article on this, and this is a real problem in the engineering world. There's a lot of people with high-frequency hearing loss who are like multi-platinum producers who are still producing like that, like still putting out big hit records that cannot hear high frequencies at all whatsoever. Which is pretty wild to me because, I mean, when was the last time you heard a record that was like the highs were just cutting your head off? Which sort of makes you wonder how much of that's being fixed in mastering. But I can tell you, I know at least two people who've told me they have high frequency hearing problems. And they actually asked me to listen to their stuff. At least once I've had that asked of me from one of them, and the other guy was like, after he was done, he was like, yeah, sound okay? And I was like, yeah. But like asked me to help them tweak their things because they can't hear the high end. And it's kind of funny. It's funny, but it's also tragic. So that's why I was like, I wanted to take 15 minutes and just remind people, like, hearing protection, especially if you're younger and you're just getting started with this stuff, don't screw around because you only get it once. And once it's gone forever. Jim, I'm sure you have hearing loss.
I have tinnitus. I'm listening to it right now. It's consistent. I mean, it's 24/7. It never goes away. You know, I recommend getting these. They're called Eros. And it's
any sort of hearing protection is going to be better than none. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything is better than nothing, but these, you get this little thing, and you have it on your key ring.
Yep.
And
so you don't lose them like I do. You don't forget them like I do.
Yep. They're inside there. I don't know if you can see them, but and they're in there all the time. And I just buy new sets about every quarter. They're not cheap, but when I wear them, I can sing, I can play, I can listen to other people play, I can hear other people sing, and believe it or not, it helps to knock down a little bit of that tinnitus that goes on forever. It goes on all the time.
I have a little bit of it already, and I've had it basically since I was in high school when I was playing. And
another thing that
wear any protection back then. That's what caused it, you know.
Yep. Another thing that will I'm gonna dovetail on this, and then we'll be done. Another thing that'll knock down some of your hearing: drinking. It's a fact. Anyone who thinks that getting drunk or drinking improves it is lying to themselves. It is a fact that drinking changes the vascular system, and it
which is required for your hearing to work properly.
it literally knocks down hearing, which is why drunks are always, "Hey man, how's it going? Come on."
Yeah, that's a big part of it, and then it also actually changes the way that the brain interprets sound.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. If you can avoid it, don't get hammered and go out and play. I'm sure that other mind-altering substances may have similar effects, but alcohol is one of the few that actually affects your cardiovascular system in that way.
Yep.
So it's worth mentioning. It's not permanent damage like not wearing hearing protection is, though, which that's one thing to keep in mind. This is permanent damage. Like I hear ringing. It's like white noise, but it's there and it's below the surface.
Yep.
It's not enough to be annoying because there's some people have reported that tinnitus is so bad that it like drives them crazy, literally. So fortunately, I'm not in any shape like that. This is not, Saving Private Ryan, a tank blew a hole in the building next to me kind of hearing loss. This is like standing in front of a 150 watt solid state amplifier cranked up to 7 for too many hours in band practice because I was an idiot kind of thing.
Yep. All that said, I still recommend turning up your amp. Just make sure you're wearing earplugs.
Yeah, definitely wear your hearing protection. And the funny thing is, like, so the last couple of shows I've been wearing my plugs, and it was funny because I was like, man, I'm not even going to be able to enjoy my sound and all this stuff as I'm going through this process, and thinking like maybe I'll just pull one out for a little bit, or and it was so funny because like you put them in and you start playing and you never even think about pulling them out. It's just like you never even because all it does is knock off. If you've got the right kind of plugs, all it does is just knock off the volume. It doesn't even change the frequency contour that you're listening to. So it's literally just like turning everything down 12 dB or something, so you can hear yourself think on stage. And know the bigger problem now, Jim, is that so many people are going to in-ears, and especially people who are familiar with wedges, they want their in-ears to be loud. And it's like, whoa, dude, you got 8 tiny speakers in there and you're plugging them into your ear canal, using it as a resonance chamber, and you got them cranked to high hell? Why don't you just blow your eardrums out now? I mean, that's where you're headed. So I caution you, even if you're in a situation where you can enjoy the luxury of in-ears, turn them down. Get them as low as you can comfortably go and play that way, because anytime you're in close proximity to your ears, that's not good. Which I can remember the first time I was in a music store and somebody was working on an amplifier, like trying to help me, pick out an amp. And I was playing and the guy got down next to the speaker before I played something, and he looked at me, he goes, "You little shit." I said, "Well, I'm sorry, I didn't think about it." I was like, "Whoops." It's a long time ago. He literally turned to me and he goes, "You little shit." Like he thought I was playing a prank on him, I was like, no, I just never occurred to me that you could have it super loud and be right next to it.
When you're young, you think you're made of bulletproof armor, and or I did, I guess. And I would stand right in front of the amplifiers. I remember going to see Iron Maiden and it being next to the stage left wall of PA gear and just listening to them blast. And do you think I was wearing earplugs? The answer is no.
There is an intense stigma for a while, and was never a part of it, but I've heard people talk about it, especially in the 80s, like the idea that you didn't wear them because it wasn't cool kind of thing. And I'm sure that went along with the punk aesthetic and all that. And it's like hardcore bands were literally just turning their amps all the way up and like just going for it, and they don't have any hearing protection whatsoever. And by the way, just because an amp compresses past 5 on the volume knob doesn't mean it's any easier on your ears if you use that compression to your advantage.
Right.
It actually means it sucks just as bad,
Exactly.
Oh. Anyway.
All right, well.
Yep, we've been Practical Guitarists. I've been David.
I've been Jim.
And tonight it was good.
Cue the music.
Ow.